like that ferment will be all head trained in the Goblet. So just like this.
Perfect. Sounds like happy hawks over there too. Wow.
Yeah. You know, and that's one of the things that's really cool about this area is that you don't have contiguous vineyards. And so you have vineyards tucked into these wild areas.
Yeah.
And so the wine should like reflect this little bit of wildness, and you know, it's a landscape of abrupt edges and wind, and so the wine should be a little uncomfortable, a little energetic.
Candy Mountain, I know that's it in the background.
Yeah.
Tell me about the impetus for the AVA.
So it'll be Washington's smallest AVA when it is approved. So it's like 820 acres. It's been submitted and approved with Washington, but now we're just waiting on all the federal stuff,
right.
You know, sitting on someone's desk somewhere in a stack waiting to get stamped, you know. Some of these rows of Cab Franc right here are planted in 2008. So we kind of added, what we did was as kind of as the wines really started to prove themselves, I think my parents started gobbling up a little bit more of the square footage of the areas, planting more rows and stuff like that. So our Cab Franc used to be all east facing in the front. And then we just had Petit Verdot and Cab back here on this, you know, little south slope. And then basically the yard was big and they're like, hey, let's plant some more Cab Franc. So that's kind of where the Cab Franc back here came. And it's crazy because we don't have as much caliche on the east facing stuff. Up there it's just like a little bit more rocky and just like floating basalt in the loam and that sort of stuff. But back here, you know, you'll get like these crazy small berries because it's like right on the I mean, you can see this stuff's pretty small right now. It'll get a little bit bigger, but you'll see it even more when we walk right over here in the Cab Franc, where it's just like so stressed and tiny little berries compared to like the front where they'll get a little bit more size on them.
agriculture here for a while, right?
Yeah, I grew up on a small farm about 20 miles from here, and met my wife in college, and her dad had this very successful large farm here. I thought I would be a banker or work for some agriculture company. I majored in ag econ, and he offered me a job just to be a farm worker here to see what happens anyway. And at the time they owned all of this undeveloped sagebrush ground that was good for essentially nothing other than probably wine grapes. And he said, well, you need to experiment with something, as the new kid on the farm. So,
There you go.
so I'm not really sure why I got into wine grapes, to be honest with you. Had a choice of cherries or apples or grapes, and at the time these French-sounding wine grapes were just beginning. Things like Pinot Noir and things like that. We didn't know how to pronounce a Pinot or a Cabernet Sauvignon. And it was just something exciting and exotic to think about wine grapes instead of what's typical in this valley of Concord grapes for Welch's juice, jam, and jelly. And so I got hooked up with the I guess you'd call him the father of the Washington wine industry at the time, Dr. Walter Clore. And in those days, all we thought about were the varieties that would survive the winters. In the 60s, 70s, and even the early 80s, that was the deciding point of what you planted, because about every 6 years or so, we would have a pretty tough winter and the vines would freeze back to the ground. So we're growing things like Limburger, Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay that were on this list of more winter hardy varieties. And anyway, it's been a fun journey exploring different varieties as time has gone on, and the industry has sure changed in that amount of time.
I think when Dad planted the first grapes, I think there was about 6 wineries here at the time. So it just shows you, it was just really the modern Washington industry was in its infancy then.